Hello everyone. Today we are going to study Romantic Age, as you could see here in the slide, and this is going to be very helpful for your UGC NET, GRF, SET and any entrance exam preparation. We are going to focus on all the major poets and prose writers of this era. Before naming the writers, we need to understand one thing very clearly. Romanticism is not just a period, it is a way of feeling and thinking. As you could see here, the overview of the Romantic Age, it started in 1798 with the publication of lyrical ballet by William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. That's why this age is also named after him. It's called the Age of Wordsworth, and this age is also named as the Age of Return to Nature. Romanticism represents a lot of things, which are a revolt against reason, a return to emotion, a celebration of imagination, a deep love for nature, as nature here worked as inspiration, and a strong belief in individual experience and emphasize on imagination and spontaneity. Because romantic writers believed that truth lies in emotion, not in logic. Now we would study the historical background of Romantic era. As we discussed earlier also that it emerged in the late 18th century as a reaction mainly against neoclassicism. There were many major forces which shaped Romanticism, which paved the pathway of this era. Amongst that was American Revolution, which started in 1776, and for the very first time in the history of mankind, it talked about individual rights. It echoed the thoughts and sentiments of independence, and also it spoke of liberty. And next comes the French Revolution, which was very important as it promoted liberty, equality, and fraternity. And this revolution inspired all the writers to question authority and hierarchy, which was prevalent in the previous decades. And of course, the publication of lyrical ballet marked the official beginning of a new era and new movement in English language and literature. And also, Industrial Revolution played an important role as rapid urbanization was destroying nature and human intimacy. So romantics turned to rural life and nature for peace and meaning. And there was also reaction against Enlightenment rationalism as romantics rejected cold reason and embraced emotion, intuition, and imagination. And also this English Reform Bill, this is also very important as this act basically broadened the electorate, reflecting changing socio-political landscape, like proving the ideals of French Revolution true to move towards greater democratic representation, prioritizing democracy, freedom of the fellow citizens of the country. Okay, so now we would move forward to study first generation romantics or the lake poets. Wordsworth defined poetry as the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. Please note down this definition because you may get a question based on this statement asking you to identify the speaker. Okay, I'm repeating his definition of poetry once again. The spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. Okay, so now let's come to this term, the lake poets. Now we could ask that why is this group named like this? The reason is very simple, that all the three members of this group used to live in the Lake District, close to nature. Okay, so that is why this group was named as the Lake Poets. And who were those three members? First, William Wordsworth. Second, S.T. Coleridge. And third, Robert Southey. Okay, now we would study William Wordsworth's works and his ideas. Okay, William Wordsworth lived from 1770 to 1850. He was often called the poet of nature, and also he was considered the father of English Romanticism. Okay, Wordsworth defined nature as a moral guide, a spiritual teacher, a shaping force of human conscience. Okay, he believed that childhood experiences shape the adult mind. This is why memory is very much central to his poetry, and this is reflected in his one of his key ideas, which is the spots of time, where he says that there are emotionally intense childhood moments which influence the adult lives. Okay, it could be the happy ones or the traumatic ones also. Okay, and he believed that nature works as moral educator because it teaches sympathy, kindness, and harmony. Okay, now we would look at his major works, which are Tintern Abbey, Daffodils. This is one of his most famous poems, and this is the first line, actually, the opening line of the poem. I wandered lonely as a cloud. Please remember this line, okay? And the prelude, okay? And there is another one which is Ode, Intimations of Immortality. I am repeating again, Ode, Intimations of Immortality. Okay. Now, if a question talks about nature as a teacher, memory and childhood, emotion and uh, feelings recollected in tranquility, you know what would be the answer if you were asked about the speaker. Okay, so the answer is Wordsworth. Okay, now we will move forward to Coleridge. Coleridge lived from 1772 to 1834. He represented the mystical and supernatural dimension of Romanticism, as it was seen in his most famous work, Kubla Khan, which is also mentioned here. Okay, unlike Wordsworth, Coleridge explored imagination, mystery, fear, guilt, redemption, all these things. Okay, now Coleridge provided an important theory, which was the theory of imagination. He divided imagination into primary imagination, secondary imagination, and fancy. Now, what is primary imagination? It's, to be very precise, it's a basic creative power of perception. Okay, and the secondary imagination is the artistic reshaping of reality, and fancy is mechanical association of ideas. Okay, we all have a little bit imaginative power, which is the primary imagination. Now, if you use your imagination power to change reality into something else, or taking instances from real life and turning it into a beautiful story or a poem or a novel, okay, then it would be considered as your secondary imagination, okay. And the fancy was like the way you associate all those ideas and bring life to those ideas actually, okay. And there is another one key concept which is willing suspension of disbelief. Like the reader temporarily accepts the supernatural as real. Like whenever we read some horror stories or the gothic ones, like we tend to believe in that for a like temporary time limit, okay. As you could see, his major works are The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Kubla Khan, Christabel. And please note it that due to limited time period, it's not possible for me to explain in detail about all these texts, but you all have to at least go through the summary of all these beautiful works, because sometimes question comes from the poems summary also, okay. So please try to study in detail, okay. As we mentioned earlier that the remaining member of the Lake Poets group is Robert Southey. Okay, he lived from 1774 to 1843. Though he is not artistically celebrated as much as Wordsworth or Coleridge, but he is important for you as questions come from his works, and matching columns and identification questions are also there. Okay, so you will have to study some of his works, okay. And he often appears as a distractor option, so please do not ignore Saudi, okay. As you could see here, some of his important work: The Life of Horatio Lord Nelson, 1813. It's a well-known biography, so please read a summary of this work. Letters from England, 1807. Life of Wesley, 1830. And in poetry, there is Thalaba the Destroyer, The Curse of Kahama, and this one, Joan of Arc, okay, 1796, his first epic poem. This one is very important. Please, I repeat, do not ignore this one. Do not avoid this one, okay. Please do read a summary of this epic poem, okay. And there is The Cataract of Loder, The Battle of Blenheim, and The Inchcape Rock. Please remember the names and the years of publication, okay. And the other works are The Story of the Three Bears. So many people, so many authors wrote stories with this title, but Saudi was the original author of this popular children's tale, okay. And also he wrote some political articles, almost 95 political articles for the Tory Quarterly Review, okay, between 1809 and 1838. Okay, please remember this factual point. Okay, now a quick stopover. There is an MCQ for you guys, which you could see on the screen. Who co-authored Lyrical Ballet? It's a very easy question, and I will be looking forward for your answers in the comment box. Okay, so now comes the second generation romantics, the rebel poets. Okay, you could see from this slide who the three rebel poets are. First one, of course, Lord Byron, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and John Keats. Okay, all three poets were rebellious, politically radical, and emotionally very intense. Okay, and most of them, not actually most of them, but all three poets met untimely death. They lived a very short and turbulent lives, but they left a deep impact on the history of English language and literature, and that is why till date we study their works. Okay, So let's now move forward to the poets' lives and their works. First comes Lord Byron. He lived from 1788 to 1824. Okay, and he introduced the concept of the Byronic hero. Now, who is a Byronic hero? The one who is proud, rebellious, isolated, emotionally complex. Now, anyone around us with this characteristic trait could be called the Byronic hero. Okay, and his poetry often challenged society, morality, and authority. Okay, and you could see here the important and major works of his: Don Juan and Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. As I said earlier also, please do not make a mistake of avoiding all those works. Please at least dive into the summary. Okay, don't leave this work, and it would be best if you actually read the original works. Okay, and now if a question refers to rebellion, satire, proud, alienated hero, you know that the answer is gonna be Byron. Okay, let's now move to P.B. Shelley, or Percy Bysshe Shelley. He lived from 1792 to 1822. Shelley is the most idealistic and revolutionary romantic poet. He believed poetry could change society, which is true to some extent also. And his famous statement was that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. Okay, this is a frequently asked NET quotation, so please give attention to that one. Okay, and the major themes he explored were freedom, revolution, love, and hope. Okay, and his major works were Ode to the West Wind, Prometheus Unbound. This is based on Greek mythology. If you have studied the mythological part, you would know which story I'm talking about. Okay, and Adonis and Ozymandias, Ode to the West Wind, as is mentioned earlier also. Okay, Ode to the West Wind, Prometheus Unbound, uh, Adonis. These are very important works. Please try to read the original ones. If not, at least go through the summary. Okay. Next, we would move to John Keats. He lived for a very short time span. He died of tuberculosis. Okay. It is very unfortunate for us. It is very unfortunate for the history of English literature itself that we lost a poet in such young age. Okay, so he was a poet of beauty, sensuous experience, and aesthetic pleasure. Okay, but there is a difference between Keats and Shelley and Byron. Unlike Byron and Shelley, Keats avoided politics, which is a very important difference. Okay, he also provided some major concepts, among which is the very famous one. I think you may have heard of that: negative capability. Now, what is negative capability? To explain it in very easy words, I'll have to say that it's the ability to remain in uncertainty, in grief, in mystery, without seeking any rational explanation. And this state of mind actually helps a writer, an author, to create something. Okay, so that is why it's called a negative capability. Okay, now his major works, there are a lot of works. Okay, amongst them there are Ode to a Nightingale, To Autumn, Ode on a Grecian Urn, Ode on Melancholy. Okay, he was actually famous for odes. Please read all those original works. If not, as I said earlier also, delve deeper into the summary section. Okay. Now, if a question mentions odes, beauty, and negative capability, you know whom to choose from the huge pools of options, which is kids. Okay. Now we will move forward to the prose section. Okay. So the three most important romantic prose writers of this era, which you could see on the screen, are Charles Lamb, Thomas de Quincey, and William Hazlitt. Now, Charles Lamb lived from 1775 to 1834. His prose's natures were actually autobiographical, nostalgic, humorous, emotional. He basically writes about childhood memories, personal suffering, and old London life. Okay? And his famous essays are Dream Children, Old China, A Dissertation upon Roast Pig, okay, which are taken from Essays of Elia. The name of the essay collection is actually Essays of Elia, and Elia is his pseudonym. Okay. Now let us move to William Hazlitt. Okay. Hazlitt was actually the intellectual critic of Romantic prose. Okay. His prose was analytical, argumentative, and critical, and he is regarded as one of the founders of modern literary criticism. Okay, his major works were The Spirit of the Age, Characters of Shakespeare's Plays, and Table Talk. Okay, and Thomas de Quincey lived from 1785 to 1859. He is famous for basically Confessions of an English Opium Eater, which is inspired from his own personal life. Okay, natures of de Quincey's prose were imaginative, musical, emotional, and psychological. And also he introduced the idea of impassioned prose. Okay, this means prose written with the intensity of poetry, which is very unique at that point of time. Okay, then Romanticism made a shift from reason to emotion, and this romantic prose actually reflected personal voice and imaginations. Okay, now we would move forward to romantic novelists. Before studying the novelists' lives and works, we need to understand the characteristics of romantic novels. In this era, the novel focused on passion, fear, love, and inner conflict. Okay, basically, it is emphasis on emotion and imagination. The next one is the gothic and supernatural elements, like the ghosts, monsters, mysterious settings, and horror were common. Okay, and nature as a powerful force. Okay, landscapes reflected the emotional states. And the next one is individualism and rebellion. Protagonists often challenged social norms. And the next one is interest in the past. Okay, medieval history, legends, and folklore were popular at that point of time. And the psychological depth, okay, exploration of human mind and moral conflict started from this era only. Okay, so romantic novels often blend emotions, imagination, and mystery. As you could see here, uh, we are talking about women novelists of that time with Mary Shelley and, of course, Jane Austen. Okay, so Jane Austen lived from 1775 to 1817. She was considered as transitional figure, okay, between neoclassicism and romanticism. Her novels focused on basically social manners, irony, and realism. Okay, though not a romantic in theme, but she belonged chronologically to the Romantic age. Okay, and you could see here some of her important works: Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, and Emma. Please read at least summaries of these works. Okay, and the next one is Mary Shelley. Okay, Mary Shelley was the most important romantic novelist. Okay, and her novel Frankenstein combined gothic horror, science fiction, and romantic imagination. And the themes of the novel were ambition, responsibility, isolation, and nature versus science. And you know that till date, so many web series, so many movies were made on this novel, so you could understand the impact of this literary work. Okay. Okay, so now we will read about Sir Walter Scott. He was born in 1771 and died in 1832. He, as it is stated here, he actually revolutionized the historical novel because he blended history, romance, and adventure. And his novels also revived the medieval past and, of course, the national history. Okay, and some of his important works are Ivanhoe and Waverley. Please do read the summary of these works, as I'm saying it time and again repeatedly, because questions do come from the storyline and plots of these literary works. Okay, so please go through the summary once at least. Okay, and now comes Horace Walpole. He was born in 1770 and he died in 1797. Okay, he is regarded as the father of Gothic novel. Please mark it. Okay, or please take a note. He is regarded as father of the Gothic novel. Okay, his novel The Cousin of Otranto, 1764, it actually introduced key Gothic elements such as mystery, terror, medieval settings, supernatural events, and whatnot, and also the ancestral curses. Okay, though he belonged to the late neoclassical period, but Walpole anticipated romantic fascination with imagination, emotion, and the medieval past, thereby acting as a precursor to romantic fiction. These are some sample questions, okay? And I will be looking forward you answering all these questions in the comment box. And please do practice such PYQs, MCQs daily, as it would help you to reinforce your understanding, to boost up, and to be prepared for the upcoming UGC NET examination. We have come to the end almost of our class. And to conclude, we would focus on 4 points. First one is Romanticism made a shift from reason to emotion. Two generations of poets shaped the movement. First one is the first generation or the lake poets, which consisted of Wordsworth, Coleridge, and Southey. And the second one was the second generation or the rebel poets, which consisted of Lord Byron, Shelley, and Keats. Romantic poets became personal and expressive. And lastly, romantic novels explored emotion, imagination, history, and Gothic theme. Okay, this age basically laid the foundation for Victorian realism and modern literature. Okay, and Romanticism foregrounded individual experience, nature, imagination, and psychological depth also. Okay, so thank you for listening, and I'm thankful to my viewers and readers for their time, patience, and engagement, which made the sharing of literary knowledge both powerful and rewarding. Thank you.